Welcome to another episode of Business Over Bourbon, where we pour equal parts business knowledge and fine bourbon to make a truly memorable cocktail. Your bartender for the evening is Corey Perlman, who's a digital marketing speaker and consultant by day, and Jimmy Buffett impersonator by night. That last part's a lie, but a man can dream. And now, put your pencil in one hand and highball glass in the other. It's time for Business Over Bourbon.
All right, welcome to another episode of Business Over Bourbon. My name is Corey Perlman, and I'll be introducing my guests in just a second, but I'm pretty excited about tonight's episode because this is the first time we've actually taken the show on the road. So really fired up about it. And the quick story about where we are is my wife and I, when we first moved to Roswell, one of the first places we sat and had dinner was a place called Table in Maine. And we had their fried chicken, and we sort of had a moment, a food moment, which I'm sure it was life-changing, which I'm sure a lot of you have had. And it was actually one of the reasons we knew we could move to Roswell. We wanted to live here. Partly, obviously, the food, but it's also the ambiance. You can kind of hear the music behind me. There's people sitting on chairs outside. It's in kind of an old Southern house. It's just an amazing establishment. And so when I knew I was going to be doing this podcast, I knew I wanted to get the owner of this establishment, which not only has great food, but also has great bourbon. So with all that said, I want to introduce the owner of Table in Maine, Mr. Ryan Pernice. Ryan, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. It's a beautiful night out here. It's not raining.
It's not raining.
Hanging out, having a good time drinking bourbon. So what's better than that?
Awesome, man. Well, let me just say a brief introduction about Ryan. For almost 20 years in the hospitality industry, Ryan demonstrates a passionate commitment for excellence in each of his restaurants. So we've got Table in Maine, Osteria Matone.
Nailed it.
Close. And Coalition Food and Beverage. Now, I haven't eaten at Coalition Food and Beverage, but I have eaten it over at O&M, and it was absolutely amazing. The desserts in particular.
Good.
You actually have a new pastry chef over there.
We do. We're excited about Kelly joining us. She got to train with Vivian for about 2.5 weeks, so she's going to do great things.
Yeah. So you can literally, I've eaten dinner here and then walked over for dessert, which was pretty awesome. I think that was your idea.
A lot of people get the twofer. The only reason we're doing a third restaurant is because people wanted to go for the hat trick. So we thought, well, we got to do another restaurant.
Now, Ryan's a proud graduate of Roswell High School, which is right down the street from here. This place opened in 2011. It's simple Southern cuisine. Like I said, their main staples, the fried chicken, which is to die for. Cornell University, so smart man. And let's see, enjoys living in Roswell and exploring the dining scene around Atlanta. And one thing I know about Ryan and his brother, if I do say so, is that they both have an extreme passion for bourbon. So tonight we're going to be tasting some bourbon, some rye, mix, and all that good stuff. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. We like to drink.
All right. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have you here is your expertise on bourbon. So give me like a quick little background. I guess, just to start out by what made you decide to open up these restaurants and what made bourbon be such a staple of your restaurant.
Yeah, sure. So when I was working at a restaurant called Myalino, it's in the Gramercy Park Hotel in New York, and I was working on a rooftop there called the Gramercy Park Gramercy Park Hotel. And there's a point after college, I think, when every man is trying to cast around for what his drink is going to be. Well, my grandpa drank that, my dad drinks this. What am I going to? Am I going to do bourbon? Am I going to do whiskey, scotch, that kind of thing? And I had a bottle of the Pappy 12-year Lot B, and it was an epiphany. It was this, bourbon can be something that I don't have to slam in a fraternity basement. This can be something I could sit and enjoy and explore a little more. So that kind of got me started down the road of bourbon. So change gears here for the restaurant itself. I was up in New York, still working at Myalino, this restaurant up there, and I was hoping to open my own restaurant. I got the opportunity to do that right here in our hometown of Roswell, Georgia. And what was exciting about that was I could do it in this old house. It was an old home built in 1910. We got to restore it from this old farmstead. And of course, if you're going to do a restaurant in an old farm, it's going to feature simple seasonal Southern cuisine. You're going to feature bourbon. So we have a huge bourbon list. We got over 50 bourbons, ryes, and American whiskeys on there. And we knew that we were going to plant our flag and we're the bourbon spot on Canton Street. So that all kind of dovetailed together. I'm here a lot. And if I'm going to be here, certainly when we were opening 12, 14 hours a day, I'm going to need a drink. So it might as well be bourbon.
And what I asked you earlier when we were kind of prepping for this, but has bourbon always been this popular in your opinion, or is it having kind of a renaissance?
Certainly not. Bourbon is definitely having a renaissance. So everyone go back, 30 years. Vodka was the big thing. And vodka was coming out with every different kind of flavored vodka you can imagine. And right now you go to any liquor store, you see Pinnacle Vodka's got like jelly bean flavor and espresso flavor and all these crazy things. Everything goes in cycles, right? And bourbon is having its moment right now. So brown liquor, bourbon, cocktail mixologists across the country have really adopted it as their kind of thing. And bourbon is certainly in focus right now.
All right. So to start us off, everybody knows that part of this show is we talk business, and we're going to talk a little bit about your restaurants and kind of how you've expanded, some marketing tips, things of that nature, but we also drink bourbon. So I've asked you to kind of, we always drink bourbon. Always drink bourbon.
Oh,
we
yeah.
have to. So this first segment we call First Sip is kind of our intro, our warm-up. So what have you picked for us for our warm-up?
All right. So in front of us, we're going to try 3 different whiskeys. We got 1 bourbon, 1 rye, and 1 mix. So we're going to dive in with 3 different flavors that I like to put out in front of people because people come here and they kind of want to learn about bourbon. And this tasting in particular is meant to give an idea of the breadth of whiskey. So we've got Maker's Mark whiskey. It's sort of our entry, let's call it a gate city or gateway drug. We got our WhistlePig straight rye from Vermont, and then we've got a Bourye from High West Distillery out of Park City, Utah.
Oh,
and those are all different kinds of whiskeys.
Yes. So this is the one High West. This is out of Colorado. You said, is that correct?
That's out of Park City, Utah.
I'm sorry, Park City, Utah. My apologies. Yes, High West out of Park City, Utah. We've got WhistlePig, which is actually one of my favorites that I've had here locally here, which I'm excited to try. And then, you can grab the Maker's Mark, which I'm sure folks have seen.
Maker's is a good one to start with because people kind of know and love Maker's. You should have heard of it already. You probably had it before. You can mix it with a ton of things, and it's this is what bourbon's supposed to be kind of sample. So that's why we're going to have that one.
What I appreciate about that, too, is that, that one, especially from an entry level, doesn't cost an arm and a leg to get if somebody wants to dive into bourbon.
No, not at all. In fact, we're probably actually going in increasing cost here, but none of these are break the bank expensive. You get into some of the Pappy Van Winkles and they're fine bourbon, but man, they're going to cost you a little bit of money. So WhistlePig in the store is probably $50 or so. Bourye is probably about the same, maybe a little less, but all of these are accessible. They should be in your local liquor store, and they're not going to kill you.
I mean, a latte this day and age is like almost $50, it seems like.
Yeah, when you're used to paying, what was the unicorn drink they had?
The unicorn frappuccino.
Yeah, I didn't have that, by the way.
My daughter tried to get a unicorn frappuccino and they were out, like Disney World being closed.
It's a sad day right there.
Terrible. All right, and can you, not to boss you around here, but can you show the folks there? I don't want to lose the tripod there, so be very careful.
Right,
but look
so
at
this
that.
is our tasting sample. We've got, you can't kind of see, I'm not going to show you until we drink the bourbon, but there's a brand in the center of this, like an actual hot brand with our logo right here. Kind of got these set up. When someone orders a flight at the restaurant, this is what we bring it out in. Set it at the table so you can know what you're getting into.
Fantastic. All right, so let's dive into our first sip, which is the Maker's Mark. So over here.
I think we're going from right to left. You're going to swivel yours around.
Okay.
Half of the
thank
art
you.
here is knowing what
Yes.
you got where.
Okay, cool. So, cheers.
Let me make sure I know what I'm getting into.
Okay.
Hold on. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Mark on the right.
So what's the sniff kind of that you're looking for in that?
All right, so anytime you're going to taste bourbon, it's just like tasting wine, right? You're going to look at it, you're going to kind of twirl it around a little bit. You're not going to swirl it as aggressively as you would with wine. You're going to get your nose right on in there, and you're just going to be smelling for what you might pick up from those flavors. So with Maker's Mark, it's going to be maybe sort of a caramelized onion, a vanilla, a toffee kind of maybe, some caramel notes there. Let's dive right in and you tell me what you smell.
Well, I mean, one thing I guess I would say from my perspective is I look at it kind of like from a smoothness versus kind of a bite. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that one definitely has a bit of a bite to me.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely got that presence to it.
Yep. Which one? This one is...
I'm doing this because I'm picking up on something we may want. As you do this, you learn a little bit about the game here. And part of the deal is you got to make sure we're tasting the right thing.
Okay.
No, we're right on. That's
Okay.
good. All right, so here's what I like about Maker's Mark. So Maker's Mark is a wheated bourbon. It's made with red winter wheat instead of a sharper grain like like rye, for instance. A lot of bourbons will make it with rye as well. One of the things I like most about bourbon, about whiskey, is that it's like Americans in general. Everyone's got a different story, right? They've all got this different folklore behind it. And some of it's true and some of it might not be true, but we don't really care about that. It's just kind of fun to know the stories. So one of the favorite stories I have about this guy is when the distiller was looking to make Maker's Mark back in the day. He wanted to try all of these different recipes, but he didn't have the time or the capital to kind of make a bourbon out of every different recipe. So he took the ingredients that you put into bourbon, so same stuff you make bread with, and he made 7 different loaves of bread. And after he baked those, he had a taste test with him and his friends, and they all decided that the one made with red winter wheat was the best. A wheated bourbon like Pappy Van Winkle is going to be a little rounder. It's not going to have quite that bite to it that some of the other whiskeys may have. Certainly a rye may have. But what I like about this one is while it does have that rounded flavor to it, it's not too saccharine sweet. It's not got this cloying kind of all you taste is corn from it. It still has a little depth. It's still a bourbon that's well made, that has a distinctive flavor, which I really enjoy.
And so in terms of, I get this question a lot all the time, so we might as well nail it now. A rye versus a bourbon, how does that hold?
Yeah. So all of these are sort of segments under the umbrella of whiskey, right? Under whiskey, you've got Scotch and rye and bourbon and probably a few others I haven't even heard of yet, but they've each got kind of rules. So bourbon has to be made in the United States. It's got to be made with at least 51% corn. It's got to be aged in charred new American oak barrels. It's got to be distilled to a certain proof and bottled at a certain proof, and this, that, and the other, some other things that are involved there. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't follow those different traits, it can't be called bourbon. Rye, similar. It's got those kind of rules around it. One of the things that differs from bourbon, it's got to be made with at least 51% rye as part of what's called the mash bill or the recipe. And if you can think of biting into a loaf of rye bread versus biting into a cornbread muffin, now the corn one is going to be sweeter. It's going to have a little bit more corn flavor to it, not to be too basic here. The rye is going to have an earthier, peppery kind of note to it. And that's how those two are going to differ. But once you say, okay, bourbon's 51% corn, the rest of it could be anything. It could be barley, it could be wheat, it could be rye, it could be a number of different grains called flavor grains. So that's why when you say this is a wheated bourbon, it intentionally has a little bit more mellow, kind of softer character to it.
Awesome. I knew that bourbon had to be 51% corn, but the 51% for rye obviously now makes sense. But then the other 49% is up to the distiller to decide kind of how they want to make their secret mix.
What's the house style? And you pick up on all these little things, obviously, when you taste it, but then you can kind of read the labels a little better. And like I said, there's always like tips and tricks. Like if you notice, Maker's Mark is one of the few American whiskeys, bourbon, that uses the Scottish spelling of whiskey. So it says whiskey without the E. You know, if you look at other bottles of whiskey, it'll have the E in there. So it's all these cool little things, which, you know, are you a better person for knowing them? Probably not, but it's cool at a party to be that guy who knows, you know?
I haven't always said, but it's a famous line that never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Absolutely. And if there is any industry that embraces that mentality wholeheartedly, it's bourbon.
So you're telling me that Jefferson Ocean thing is just is that one real, or?
You know, who knows? Yeah.
It's a good story.
Could be marketing, could be fun. No, it's fun to know with Jefferson Ocean. So he's talking about this bourbon that they put on a boat that goes around the world. And it's supposed to mimic the original conditions of shipping bourbon down the Mississippi River. And, a year on a boat in the ocean is equal to like 10 years of aging or whatever. And it's right and it's wrong and it's left and it's right and who cares, but it's fun to know, right? So did you know that on Jefferson Ocean, every bottle of Jefferson Ocean, there's sort of a grayed out silhouette of a ship on the back, and they're all different ships. That's and awesome. Supposedly the gray silhouette on the bottle you're drinking from is the one that bottle sailed around the world on. So I'll say it's true.
I want it to be true. That's freaking awesome. All right, so we're going to go into our second segment of Business Over Bourbon here. We're going to take little segment breaks here for our future sponsors that will be getting on the show here. So we're going to take a quick break and come right back. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks. What's up, everybody? Business Over Bourbon segment 2 of our Business Over Bourbon show. I'm here with Ryan, who's also just been so awesome so far on a beginning sort of introductory roll into bourbon. So far, we've tried Maker's Mark, which is a nice, as we talked about, stepping stone into your world of bourbon. And we're going to move into a second one here. But before we do that, this is our segment called Straight Up No Chaser. So kind of really dive into a little bit of your business background and acumen and such. So you've got 3 restaurants, and I'll brag on you for a second. I mean, this place, when this guy was sitting next to us here, he was traveling from Dallas. He asked the one place that he should stop in Atlanta, and they told him Table in Maine. So you've got an amazing reputation. You started in 2011. Did you have any strategy behind that, or was it just really good food?
When we opened in August of 2011, which you remember is kind of like the depths of the recession there. And the thought was, we knew a lot of people who live around here drive down into Buckhead, they drive down into Atlanta to get that kind of what I'll call urban quality dining experience. And we said, what if we provide that right on Kent Street, right in people's backyard? And we do food and a service and provide an ambiance of a quality that people can get down there, and even some things they can't, like our beautiful patio over here. I bet people will stop here and won't drive all the way in town. So that was kind of where we started, and we set out to be a neighborhood restaurant focused on great food, great service, great quality. And that was the test. So we're turning 6 years old in August. So I think so far we can say that worked okay. We're still around.
And, and this is the straight up no chaser. So I want to get real kind of honest with you for a second. Reviews. I mean, I know I've spoken to a lot of restaurant industries in my job, and every time I say the word reviews, they like sink. Like, how do you manage reviews? I know you guys get a ton of positive ones. Do you read them all? Do you get kind of fired up if you get a negative one? How do you handle it?
We do read them all. There's something to learn from every review you get, and it definitely is a double-edged sword. Like, look, I don't want to get too highfalutin and ivory tower, but reviews are a way for us to get feedback about how we're doing. And if you just kind of write them off as this is someone who doesn't know anything who's going to tell me how to run my business, you're going to miss that opportunity to learn. So make no mistake, I hate them. I don't like them.
The bad ones.
But they're useful. Yeah, just that on Yelp, if you have a bad day at work, I don't know if everyone can get on Yelp and tell the world how horrible you are. But we really genuinely do want everyone to love the restaurant. We want you to love your experience. So I encourage people, let us know. Certainly, if you're coming in, here's how you can make my experience great. And if we're veering slightly left or right, let us know how we can course correct, and we want to do that. So they are challenging. I used to I pay the same amount of attention, but I used to take them a lot more personally in the beginning. And now I know, look, we've got a good restaurant. We may fall down on some things. We certainly make mistakes. But if we have the opportunity to learn from it and come back around and improve something about our business, we're going to do that.
The other thing I tell the folks in the audience, especially restaurants, is people are more motivated when they're unhappy than when they're happy. So the one thing we have to remember, obviously, as listeners, is when we're happy about an experience, write that review. I always say to people, like I'll say, gosh, I had a great experience with my wife at this hotel or even at this restaurant, and we have the best intentions of writing a review, but our motivation isn't quite as high as if we had a bad experience somewhere. And the other thing for you guys is when, a waiter or waitress gets their handshake and say, I just want to tell you, this was the greatest restaurant experience I've ever had. What they should respond with is the best way to thank you is to write a review. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're cautious about trying to look like we're grade grubbing, I think everyone who comes in should have a good experience. So in some way, I don't want to say we shouldn't get credit because your food was great and your service was great. But I think if you want to write a review, I'll happily take it.
So more of an organic approach.
Yeah, exactly. We've been open for 6 years and we've had a 4.5 rating on Yelp. That's awesome. I think that's a huge testament to our team and to what we're doing here. At the end of the day, if Yelp didn't exist, I hope we'd still hold ourselves to as high a standard. It's just, like it or not, a convenient way to kind of distill everything down into a number rating.
Do we want to get into the fact that if Yelp filters out good reviews, or let's do that for another podcast?
Let's keep another one on that. We got a whole new hour.
Okay. All right. Let's move into the second tasting of bourbon here as we keep moving on. So what's our next one, the WhistlePig?
Yeah, so this is a rye. This is WhistlePig out of Vermont. I like WhistlePig for a few reasons. First of all, it kind of disabuses people of the notion that bourbon rye whiskey has to be from Kentucky. It doesn't have to be from Kentucky. And we're going to taste a bourbon that's not from Kentucky either in a minute. I like knowing the people behind the booze. We got to meet David Pickerel, who's the master distiller for WhistlePig. It's out of Vermont. They're doing some incredible things. They are doing a lot of experimentation with what we call their Old World series. They're putting out some bourbons, some whiskeys, some ryes that have been aged in Sancerre barrels, Sauterne barrels, some Madeira barrels, some port barrels, some interesting things like that. I always worry when that happens, going back to what I said earlier about the vodka that's like jelly bean flavored. I always worry you're sort of doing it for kitsch sake, like marketing sake.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually pretty good stuff. I know they take a lot of pride in their rye. I'm excited. Next year they're actually about to start making distilling their own liquor, which is going to be pretty exciting. But another interesting point that I sort of just touched on is here's a guy who doesn't distill his own rye, doesn't distill his own spirits. He sources it from different places, combines, blends it, and then ends up with a product that tastes fantastic. So, you got Maker's Mark, who does distill all their own product. You got WhistlePig, who sort of combines it. They're going to start distilling their own next year. You got Bourye, who also, which we're going to taste third, they also distill, combine, and blend their own stuff. So there's some really exciting things going on in the world of whiskey that it's worth paying attention to.
One thing I'd heard, and I just want to clarify if this is true or not, with bourbon, it has to be in the original charred barrel. Is that the same thing with rye?
Yeah, charred new American oak. So what that means is you got a lot of Scotch makers who can age their product in used barrels. And this is pretty commonplace. Actually, you see this a lot with craft breweries now. So you see beers that have been aged in, port barrels or bourbon barrels and whatnot. With bourbon, part of what enables you to call it bourbon has to be aged in charred new American oak.
Awesome. Well, let's give this one a try. It's the middle one.
This is the middle one.
Okay.
So again, this is WhistlePig. This is out of Vermont. This is a straight rye whiskey.
I smell vanilla. Again, I'm not very good at that, but I feel like I do it.
You should get a lot more spice and pepper and sort of spikiness from this to stay with you a little bit longer.
Yep.
So again, rye as a flavor grain has a lot more sort of oomph and pepper and earthiness to it. And so that's what hits you from this. Whereas, some bourbons, all I taste is corn. It's all sweetness to me. Okay. I like rye a little more because it's got a little bit more depth to it, a little bit more going on. And there's certainly more to kind of push and pull out of there than some of the bourbons I've tasted.
I found that one kind of kept, like I tasted it as it kind of went down a little bit more than I do bourbon. So like it had a couple of flavor profiles that came toward the end versus bourbon where, like you said, I almost like when it's smooth, you kind of almost bypass the flavors a little bit.
Yeah, if you think of the smoothest Scotch you've ever had, it may be so smooth it doesn't even like register in your mouth. Your palate doesn't even kind of respond to it. But this rings a little more and kind of resonates. It's like licking a battery sometimes. You get a lot more of that charge from it.
You've done that before?
Just as comparisons. Like I've done it so you don't have to.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're really welcome, good. By the way.
So if I heard you correctly, if you had to choose, it's rye over bourbon.
It is rye over bourbon.
All right, back to business for a second here. Talk to me about some of the marketing strategies. So we've had, just to kind of prep you on this, my background social media, so we've had a lot of social media conversations on here. I always watch you guys and like you and all that kind of fun stuff. And again, that's one of those things you guys have done really well. Any specific strategies you've had with LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and some things that maybe you've missed?
Yeah, I think, we're still a small restaurant group. One of the things most interesting to me about doing a third restaurant is we've got to build not only the restaurant, but also the group behind it. Right. So if you go back to the day when it was just me and my chef that were doing table and name, I couldn't do LinkedIn and Facebook and Snapchat and Twitter and this and that and all these things. So we kind of said, okay, we're going to focus on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. That's going to be our thing. So that's kind of the place we play. I think what's most important to us on all of those channels is a level of honesty. If you could think of some brands, everything they push out seems contrived. It seems like a PR team is behind it. If you see a tweet, an Instagram, or a Facebook from us, it comes from one of two people, one of whom is me. So, you get the owner there taking photos of the special and kind of tweeting out what it is. And I think that imparts a level of earnestness and genuine, I want people to know what we're about. I want people to know what we're excited about. And when that comes from me or the other people who do our social media, Holly, I think that comes through in what we do. It is not the flashiest social media channels, but we do, put our heart into the food that hopefully comes through. We just started talking about filters. Like, what filter do we want to use for our Instagram? I was like, I don't want to use a filter. But, branding's important. We always kind of talk about what do we want our brand to be.
Authenticity, right? I mean, they say it's the number one rule to doing social media well is, and the funny thing is, and you're nailing it right on the head, is people like you guys on Facebook to humanize your brand. They don't want to see Table and Main. They want to see the owner and the people behind Table and Main.
Yeah, and I certainly don't think who the hell I am or I'm so special. But people ask, okay, well, what have been some of the secrets behind the success of the two restaurants. My brother and I own Osteria. I own Table and Main. We're here a lot. We're in the dining room. We're taking pictures of the food, which, by the way, means that we can see if something's, maybe what's kind of. So I think people respond to the fact that as owners, we are here. This is not a thing where we do this and cash the checks on some beach in Cabo. This is my life. So being here is important to me, and I hope that comes through not only in the social media, but in your experience at the table.
It's funny. I can attest to that even before we ever did these bourbons and all of that I met you and your brother, I think it was both of them, and we were having desserts over there. We had the most friendly conversation with the two of you guys. And to this day, when I told the same friends that we were going to do this, they reminded us about that conversation we had. So it may have been I caught you on a good day, but you're pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm a pretty shy guy. So if I was talking at a table, that's a stretch. That's a stretch.
All right. Well,
you drank way more of the rye than you did of the bourbon.
I did. I'm pleasantly. I remember liking WhistlePig. I have to be completely honest that I didn't fully understand that it was a rye. I'm still learning. I'm only about 2 years in terms of my bourbon journey. I absolutely love it. And my wife
is admitting you have a problem.
Yeah. Pretty close. I have a show. I can actually write this stuff off now.
Good. It's all business expense. You and me both.
Yeah, I know you can. Yes, but I did really like the WhistlePig. So if you're following along. That was WhistlePig, again, from Vermont. It's a straight rye whiskey. And, one other thing about the proof. I noticed with some of the other ones I've been doing, they've been as low as 80% on up to, 105 proof, that type of thing. Where do these rank?
So to be called bourbon, to be called rye or scotch, there are numbers ascribed to. You have to distill to a certain proof, bottle at a certain proof. It can't be lower than, it can't be, I'm actually not sure if there's a higher than. I know it can't be lower than a certain proof. I think that's 84, but don't quote me on the numbers. I've never been good with math. But generally, there are things called on a label called, you'll see barrel strength. You see barrel strength, it's something that's been taken right out of the barrel. Oftentimes people kind of dilute it with a little bit of water. Barrel strength means it's going to be like 125, 130, 140 proof kind of thing. You're starting to get to like Bacardi 151 style. But generally people interpret that as heat or sort of acidic flavor on the palate, because that much alcohol, that packs a good deal of punch. So that's all comes down to the distiller and what he wants for the brand and what he wants for the flavor of his bourbon. If he wants that to be as upfront a component of the drink, if he wants it to be a little smoother, maybe he'll bring the proof down. Some bourbons do I hate to use the word better, but I find, let's say, a more agreeable job of having higher proof bourbons that don't come off as just totally hot. Like, for instance, I'll say Noah's Mill. Noah's Mill is a really high proof bourbon. It's got a lot of proof and power to it, but I still get a lot of depth and color and molasses kind of flavoring to it. There are some other bourbons that are barrel strength that I just get heat, and it's just like drinking Bacardi 151, which is fine if that's where you're going. But if you're just trying to drink something with a meal, that's a rough road to hoe.
Nice. All right. Well, we are going to wrap up this segment and come back for one final sip segment. And we're going to get a little deep there. I want to kind of talk a little bit about your background and kind of your mission behind this. And, when you lead a team and some of the things that some of the entrepreneurs and business owners and executives, one thing I will say again about your restaurants is I've never met a person that wasn't a friendly person that really went out of their way to make our experience good here. And that has to have something to do with you and your brother. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So we'll be right back for our third and final segment.
Sounds good.
Bye. Welcome back to Business Over Bourbon Part 3 in our series here. I'm here with Ryan, and we are talking about owning restaurants. We're talking about the great food and atmosphere we have here at Table and Main, and we're also talking about bourbons, whiskeys, ryes, riskies?
I like riskies better.
Like
this is segment 3, so we're 2 riskies in.
We're 2 riskies in. Things are starting to get a little interesting. Speaking of which, before we get into our third bourbon here, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about philosophy.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to get on, you want to lie down, you want to recline?
Or
yeah.
Socrates?
Yeah. I mean, we're going deep here, but your philosophy on creating an atmosphere where people like to come to work and your employees are engaged and all that. I mean, employee engagement is a serious topic in business today. And I know you guys didn't come into it being like, oh, we're going to have our employees engaged, but somehow you do. So what are some of your secrets with that?
I'd say the first awesome thing about owning the business is you get to choose who you work with. And I think we really we really prize people who have a sense of, I'll call it personality, but certainly warmth to them. We definitely feel like, hey, if you've never served before, but you've got the right personality to this and you're a great person who likes to make other people happy, we can work with that. We can teach you what you're going to need to know. I mean, probably half of your listeners have had jobs in restaurants before. It's a demanding job, but it's not the hardest thing in the world. What's hard about it is that you've really got to care about whether or not that person at your table is genuinely having a good time. And I can't teach that. So I think when we're interviewing people, we really, pay attention to resumes and work experience and all that stuff's important. But what's more important is, do I feel like you're someone who's going to take care of our guests? Because people walk out of the restaurant telling a story, and we're all storytellers. We're all going to tell, 1 million people if you have a bad experience, 2 people if you have a good experience, but you're still going to tell a lot of people. So my attitude is, if you feel like you're genuinely taken care of and your server really went out of his or her way to make sure you had a great, positive meal, we may make a misstep on the steak. We may make, a mistake in setting down the right type of knife. But when you leave, you're going to feel like, gosh, I was really well taken care of there. So the details are important. Let's get the details right. But overall, let's make sure we make our guests happy. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate it.
Is there anywhere in the interview process, is there a question you ask? Is there some sort of characteristic trait that you look for in a person that is going to make them care about your customers?
Honestly, I think you get the most context from someone when they're not sitting in an interview asking questions. Do they introduce themselves to other people? Do they look you in the eye? Do they smile? Do they share funny stories? Are they very serious? Are they kind of, focused and dour? Or are they light and looking to gain information from you? So I think there's a lot of unspoken attributes and context you can get from someone outside of the, tell me about your work history. Tell me about, how you like to take care of people.
Brilliant advice. My wife is directing and producing this segment, and she's over there nodding her head in agreement. So, well said. All right, let's move on to our third and final bourbon here. As we go into this, I've noticed that neither of us, and this is a stretch for me because I typically do put ice in my bourbon just to chill it. But what's your feeling about icing a bourbon or putting it in the freezer, to get it chilled or having it neat? What's the feeling on that?
I personally think you should drink whatever you're drinking the way you like to drink it, like the way that'll make you happy. My brother's a sommelier, Dan Pernice. He works down the street at Osteria Matona. He owns that one with me. He'll own Coalition Food and Beverage, our third, with me. Working with your brother, by the way, is a whole nother segment. We can do that. He has upped my game, and I hope I've upped his, but man, it's a good time. But anyway, so he's, as a sommelier, will tell you, his greatest skill is that he could take the complex, sort of aristocratic world of wine and make it familiar and comfortable and make you feel like, you're getting something that'll really make you happy. And that, at the end of the day, is the most important thing, whether you're talking about wine or water or Coke or bourbon. So, however you like to drink it. Personally, I like to drink cold beverages, so I typically do add ice. Oftentimes that can kind of open up the flavors a little bit and enable you to get a little bit more from it. With cognac, you'll see people kind of warm it in their palm with the glass. Well, that's because it opens up the flavors. There's a purpose to that. That's not just because it looks cool, although it does. That enables you to get a little bit more from it. So sometimes adding a little bit of water, adding a little bit of ice can enable you to pull more from that liquor. Specifically with high booze things, high proof items, you may be able to enjoy it a little bit more if you do add something. But really, it's however you like to drink it.
Have you heard putting a bottle in the freezer? Is that something that you would recommend? Will it freeze?
For bourbon, that's weird. If you want to do that, you do that, and I will be the first to happily drink some with you. But
That's weird. It's okay.
Do you do that?
No. I've heard somebody tell me that. I've never done it.
That's fine.
I swear I've never done it.
I've heard that with vodka and gin, but never with bourbon.
No, I just was told that you could do it and then you wouldn't have to, water down your drink. But I haven't yet to try it, and now I will officially never try it.
Well, Lord, no, please. But alcohol supposedly, and I'm not a chemist, but someone out there is going to be like, that's not true.
Right.
It freezes at a lower temperature than water does. So I know that's why vodka doesn't freeze in your. But Lord knows they've got tons of different ways for you to get drinks inside of you. You've got like whiskey rocks now you can use. You've got like those, they sell the spherical kind of, we use the big rocks here, so we had to buy special ice cubes for that. So there's a million different ways. They make great gifts for you to like help someone drink more.
Yes.
And I fully endorse all of them. In any way that helps you drink booze that makes you feel good about it, do it.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about a lot of our sponsors literally never happening due to the fact that this is basically endorsing alcohol and booze, which we do happily on this show. And
I've never said that I'm a peddler of vices here at the restaurant. You guys had the burger today?
Oh, it was awesome.
I guess it's not tofu, it's delicious and amazing, but it's got pimento cheese and oh gosh, it's not great for you, but it's delicious. And that's what we do. So
It's freaking awesome.
never said we're a health food restaurant.
That's right. All right. So what are we drinking here? This
is our third and final whiskey. This is actually Bourye from High West Distillery.
Bourye.
So for a while, I was on a kick for whiskey, bourbon from places other than Kentucky, because a lot of people feel like bourbon's got to be from Kentucky. It doesn't. It has to be from the United States. So this is out of Utah, I'm blanking on the name, Park City, Utah. A guy named David Perkins makes this. We did our first ever whiskey dinner with David 4 or 5 years or so ago. But so this is coming out of Park City, Utah. It's this beautiful ski-in gastro distillery place. It's amazing. If you ever get the chance, please go. But he's a guy who believes that the real magic and art of whiskey is not in distilling, it's in blending. So he buys this. There's nothing in this bottle that's less than 10 years old. And while the whiskeys themselves aren't a secret, the proportions are. So you can go online and find out exactly what's in here, but you'll never know how much of what. So it's a bourbon and a rye. It's a blend of the two. And this is the third in the line of 3 different whiskeys that are coming out. The first was called Bourye. The second was called Son of Bourye. And then this guy here is called Bourye Limited Sighting because it's the third incarnation of those whiskeys.
That's awesome. It is starting to get windy out here.
Good fun thing.
Let's try this.
I'm game. We can always pull this for a second if you need. You've got sensitive equipment here. I do. This is going to be fun.
Wow, it's coming down. Oh, shit. Hey, everybody. This is crazy. The rain's coming down, the wind. We're drinking bourbon. We're drinking. I mean, this is the elements right here.
Yeah, what's better than this, right?
This is kind of awesome.
In the rain.
Full
This is
on
our
raining.
executive chef here. If you guys want to meet him.
Yeah, we would love to meet him. Come on in for a
Now,
second.
Woody has the added benefit of actually being from Kentucky. So all of the whiskeys we drink.
So in my bottle, when I was a child, we had bourbon and what are we drinking? This is Makers. So Makers from where I was born in Louisville.
But you were born in Louisville. Oh, of course you're gonna like.
Born in Louisville.
That's awesome.
No, yes.
Well, your food is, you can't see me right now, but I just want to say really quickly, a shout out to the food here. It's just absolutely freaking amazing. You do a great job. And
A lot of it comes from my Kentucky roots.
Does it really?
Yeah, a lot of it does. Soup beans are something I grew up on with my grandmother, and serve a lot of corn here just because of bourbon and whatnot. So.
and since you are a chef, really quickly, talk about like the pairings to bourbon and food. And is there anything that you kind of look for with that?
Every time that we do a bourbon pairing, I like I said before, we always pair it with some kind of corn, a popcorn or grits or something like that. So we always pair it with that because what is bourbon made from? It's made from corn. We always take some leftover rye from making bread, so we make sure that we always have a rye element to some things. So, and of course, you taste some bourbons and you can taste candy corn in some bourbons. I think my favorite bourbon is Black Maple Hill, which you can't find anymore, but it has a very candy corn indicative taste to it. So that's a great to pair with desserts and stuff like that. Great for the fall time. So,
And last question for you, since we got you here, 2 or 3 bourbons for our audience that maybe they could try that maybe they've never had before that you might think of off the top of your head.
Oh gosh. Some of my favorites, Angel's Envy. Let's see. Michter Sour Mash. That's another one of my favorites. Most ryes are becoming my favorites. Now, what is American Spirits rye? That is the Phoenix. That's Resurgence rye. That's kind of one of my favorite ryes lately. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for the cameo appearance on our show, man. Say your name one more time.
Woolery back. So, yep.
Thank you. Cool. That was awesome.
There's a saying in pairing. It's called "What grows together goes together."
Okay.
So if you're ever struggling to find a pairing of any sort of liquor with food, what grows together goes together. If you're pairing some ingredient that's indigenous to some part of some country somewhere, look up what their native kind of liquor is, or certainly wine. If the region is known for growing really great truffles, really great, they're known for pasta, they're known for, what he said, corn, chances are the spirit native to that part of the world also goes with that food. So people struggle with pairings because it's like, oh gosh, pairings, that demands a higher intelligence. It really doesn't. What grows together goes together, and taste it before you have it with guests, and you'll be half the way there.
Hashtag what grows together goes together. I've actually never heard that, but I'm sure that's a saying. We'll never forget it. That's awesome.
So we just said it. It's a saying.
It's a saying. It's official.
Someone said it.
So it's this one? Is that?
Yeah, you're all the way on the left. This is Bourye. It's a mixture of a bourbon and a rye. It's out of Park City, Utah. I did actually get the chance to go there. Everything these guys make is amazing. The man himself, David Perkins, is such a cool guy. He came in with like a huge belt buckle and a cowboy hat and a flannel shirt, and he looked exactly like what you want a whiskey man to look like. His background is actually all in chemistry, I think like biochemistry. His parents live really close to the restaurant, actually, so he's been in a couple times. But man, these guys are doing great things. I think they too are going to start distilling their own stuff. But I got to go visit their beautiful pot stills, their copper pot stills out there. They're doing awesome things.
Did he light a match off his cheek?
He could have. He certainly could have. We did a duck pastrami on that dinner. That was just what we call in the industry stupid good. It was amazing. We did a veal sweetbreads with their OMG rye. It was one of our earliest and I think one of our best tastings we've ever done.
All right, I'm going to pause for just a quick second, and then we'll come right back to wrap up.
People on the rye because no one's ever like really delved into rye, but it's just better.
We're back, and you just heard it from the man himself that one of the takeaways we had from today is if you haven't delved into rye, and it's funny, people have said that to me over and over again, you got to dive into rye.
Better.
It's just better.
It's awesome.
You heard it here first. So real quick, couple other questions for you just to kind of get head us down the finale here. Having multiple places, and a lot of the people that are listening, including myself, have employees that we don't see every day. That trust factor, the integrity level, making sure the job gets done when you're not there. How do you instill that?
I think it starts in hiring, right? Like it starts in who you bring on the team. And we have been very blessed to have a lot of people who care enough about the business, as much as I do. People who have been with us for 3-4 years, like Mark over there, who has been with us both at Table in Maine and at Osteria Matone, our lead line cooks over there. He started as a prep cook here. He still preps here in the kitchen in the mornings. Then he goes over to Osteria and he leads the line over there. We have been very lucky to have people who stay with us a good long time. And as an organization, specifically a restaurant organization, we prioritize retention a lot. Because if you walk in as a guest and you see the same people around, there's generally a sense of, okay, I'm going to be taken care of the way I like to be taken care of. In the kitchen, they know the dishes, they know the recipes, they know how to make things right. That means they can kind of go off the cuff better too, because they just know the game a bit more. From my perspective, it makes our guests happier, so that's the reason we do it. It also makes my life easier. If I can create an environment where people want to stick around for a little while longer, I'm all about people really loving where they work, and I want to have that environment because I am pretty competitive and want to be the best anyway. But it's also just better. Like if I don't have to go out and put another Craigslist ad on every week for a line cook, the guests are going to have a better time. We're going to make more money. The restaurant's going to do better as a whole, and we can get focused on more exciting things more quickly.
How about like meetings and such? Are you a fan of meetings? Not so much. Do you do them a lot? No.
We have one full company meeting every other week. It's everybody who's a manager in the company. We meet every other Friday where I share P&L numbers, kind of the business reading for the week. Here's what I'm focused on. Here's what I'm concerned about. I actually do worry that those meetings are too, I'll say, top down, because I don't want to be like, everyone do this and I'm going to talk at you for an hour and then go out. But I value more not meeting frequently and just letting the team do their thing. So I view those meetings more as a state of the union of here's where our numbers are. Here's what I want everyone focused on this week. Here's a heads up for what's coming down the pike. Laura's going to give a bit of a shout out about events, and then let's get back to work.
And my last question for you is, last two questions is kind of what's the future hold for you guys, and I want you to mention your third restaurant, where that's located, because I'm not sure about that, and I'll be very interested. And then just some of the best advice you've been given. I don't know if it was from your dad, your mom, past teachers or whatever that's helped you in your business. So kind of a twofold there.
So where we're headed, I think we're headed into the most exciting period of our restaurants because, as we look to Coalition, which is our third restaurant, not only are we opening a third restaurant, which is some amount of work, we're also building out a restaurant organization. I don't want us to operate like a one-off kind of this is all we're doing. It's not a lifestyle business for me. We've got amazing people who work here. I need to provide opportunities for them to grow and do amazing things. So the way I see this business headed in the next couple of years is let's do a killer opening for Coalition. That's a concept that we hope to do more than one of. But after we prove that concept and we kind of look to the next couple of years, I want to get the brain trust together and say, hey, what do we want to do? What are we excited about? What can we do with this brand and this organization we've built and the talent that we have? What gets us excited and jazzed? Because what's death to me is just having to do things because that's what you've always done. It just sounds like it sucks. So at a certain point, let's do the work, make the restaurant good, and then we'll come back together and decide how we want to pivot, what we want to do next, and let's use the strength of the organization we've all worked so hard for the last 6 years. We've made some money. Let's use it in a way that makes us happy, and I think that helps make our guests happy. So that's that.
Where's that one located?
That one's going to be a Coalition Food and Beverage. It's going to be downtown Alpharetta at the corner of Milton Avenue and Canton Street, which is weird because our two current restaurants are on Canton Street. It's a different Canton Street. That's going to be confusing in ways I don't even know yet. But that one opens in hopefully September, October.
We know that area well and can't wait to go there. And the last question is business advice. Just one last sort of nugget to give to people who might be starting out in business, who might be in business for a while, business owners, whatever you got.
Well, I'll give you two. You get a two for one that I heard from our investor who's been a mentor of mine, Doug Curling. And he told me once, he said, do you want to say what you want to say or do you want to get what you want to get? Because you can generally only choose one. And that has been invaluable because at times when, whether it's ego or pride or some misplaced desire to assert your rightness, do you want to say what you want to say or do you want to get what you want to get? If you want to get that guest to come back another time, if you want to keep that employee, if you want to, get your chef to put something on the menu that you want as opposed to it's all about let me make sure I'm aware of what I'm about to say so that it comes out in a way that I get what I want to get, not speak with my ego or speak with my emotion and say something stupid that's just going to create another issue separate from the one I'm trying to deal with. So that's that one. The one I'll give is know what you're getting into. And, people have dreams and I hate that a lot of people I'm trying not to use an expletive, but can I just shit on this idea of like, people shouldn't have dreams anymore. And that's kind of corny to have a dream. Like I had a dream to open a restaurant. A lot of people gave me a foot up to do that. And so I hate when people kind of slam other people with dreams. But what I would say is, if you've got a dream, great, go do that, but know what you're getting into. So opening a restaurant's no joke. And for the first 3 years of Table of Maine, I didn't go to bachelor parties and weddings and births and things that my friends really wanted me to be at and things that I personally really want. And that is a struggle and it's really, really hard. But there was a long time where I said, look, this is what I'm doing right now. And I'm doing this because at 25, we opened Table of Maine, I can afford to be selfish. And there's not a lot of time in your life when you can do that. I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a mortgage or anything. So I could say, look, this is what I'm doing with my life because I've got journals going back to when I was 10 years old wanting to do this. That's awesome. So this is what I'm doing, but it does mean other things for your life. And just know what you're getting into.
Yeah, one thing I will just add to that is that there's never the perfect time to jump. And you probably know that, even though I appreciate you saying you didn't have some of the risks that maybe having children or a marriage or a mortgage, but you still had risks and you still jumped. Yeah. And thank God you did, because we would be lesser from our stomach's perspective without the great food that you guys provide. So man, Ryan, this has been awesome, man. I really appreciate you being on the show, giving us this education on bourbon and on Rise and just your business acumen, which has just been awesome, man. So if people want to stay in touch with you, how can they stay in touch with you?
So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that jazz. Feel free to email me. I'd love if you have any questions or anything, or if I can be of any help whatsoever. I know I got where I am because a lot of people spent the time to help. So my email is ryan.pernice@tableandmain.com. You can look me up on Twitter at ryan.pernice, or on Instagram, the same thing, at Ryan Pernice. Or you could just come into the restaurant.
You're usually here.
Give me a shout to him coming in on this day. I will be here.
Can they just literally walk in the door and yell out Ryan?
No, absolutely. There's nothing would weird out my general manager more than like, why are all these people just yelling your name?
Well, again, thank you so much for being on with us, man. This could not have gone better. I'm just honored to have you as a part of the show. And I will end by just saying thank you to my lovely wife, Jessica, for helping me direct this show. And we had a wonderful dinner here beforehand. It was freaking awesome. Come here, enjoy your meal at Table and Main.
That burger.
Freaking amazing.
Low fat.
Oh my gosh.
Low fat, low sodium, made out of tofu.
Yeah, right.
Basically a vegetable.
Basically. You're actually burning more calories when you eat it than when you actually eat.
100%.
All right, everybody. Thanks. See you next time. Bye-bye.